Hey guys, I'm Round One Fight. So, as some of you may know, today is the 1-year anniversary of my channel, and to celebrate it, I have a few surprises for you guys that I may or may not release earlier depending on how long this video takes. Those being, my ranking of Death Battle Season 6, my reaction to Bill's Cypher vs. Discord, and this. A lot of Death Valley based YouTubers have done something like this, and I figured I'd follow suit after Midnight Phantom gave me the idea. So, this is going to be a sort of Death Battle season if I was in charge of making it. I'm trying not to be biased, so it won't just be composed of all my most wanted matchups, but it will be based on a bunch of matchups I think will do good as episodes, and matches I think should happen in a season sooner or later. So, a bit of rules. I'm going to restrict it to like 2 or 3 matchups of each specific thing. There's going to be a few video game matches, a few anime matches, a few cartoon matches, some out-of-the-box matchups, and of course Marvel and DC, along with Marvel versus non-Marvel and DC versus non-Marvel. Stuff like that. So, enough of me rambling, let's get into it. Number 1, Cuphead vs. Shovel Knight. This one is kinda self-explanatory. Video game fights or duels with extensive arsenals always make for good season openers, as proven with stuff like Dante vs. Bayonetta and Harley Quinn vs. Jinx. This one not only holds that, plus the indie angle, but this has been made a lot more popular since Indie Cross and accelerated my preferred for Shovel Knight, who I think more than deserves a return to the show after his bout with Scrooge McDuck 6 years ago. It's got a lot of potential for a great season opener and would draw in plenty of views due to the popularity of both character/verses. And the fight has a lot of potential because it's a pretty standard ranged character versus close fight character like Stitch vs. Rocket. And matches like those have almost always had great setups and execute that in epic ways. As for who wins, Shovel Knight kind of bodies, but hey, I'm not complaining. Up next, as a way to keep the hype going, is one of the more popular cartoon fights in recent memory, Finn and Jake vs. Mordecai and Rigby. I've not seen much of either cartoon, but the latter seems pretty funny and the former a pretty good gut wrench. Not only is this a duo fight, which we have not gotten since, Ratchet and Clank vs. Jack and Daxter, but brings this kind of serious cartoon nature I like to see, like in something like Gravity Falls, on top of a ton of collection powers and a lot of stuff that I think would be a good way to flip expectations. Not sure who wins, as I've heard plenty of arguments for both, but I'm pretty sure Finn and Jake's arguments get higher and are better formed for the most part. Third on the list is Trigon vs. Dormammu. It's recently been pretty popular since Phoenix vs. Raven, and the idea has decent connections, has been around for a while, and goes into the Unga Bunga cosmology BS in a way befitting of the scale, and given their presence in their universes, it would flow better in an analysis. Seeing basically comic devils fighting, screw you Mephisto, I'm so pissed about one more day, already sounds like a cool concept, but the similar nature of Saz really leaving this to hacks and magical powers gives the good chance for both to work around the box and use demonic powers that have beautiful animation and writing potential. Basically, it's one of the few Marvel vs. DC matches left that can be crazy cosmology crap and still be interesting. Since hacks play such a big factor, I'd probably bet Dormammu, since he's the main villain of Doctor Strange, aka Mr. I can do whatever the heck I want via Star Trek mumbo jumbo. Moving on to the wonderful land of weebs is Eren Jaeger vs. Kaneki. This one has been around for a while, and frankly, it's no wonder why. Attack on Titan is incredibly popular, and probably in a semi-big 3 with My Hero Academia and Demon Slayer after the shonen one of the early 2000s, even though I don't understand why. and Eren is the most versus applicable character of it, along with being the best way to discuss the series' terminology and story since it is Eren. Same goes with Kaneki, but both stories are heavily praised mangas of monsters and men, and is an excellent series combination for an even better episode. This has so many areas to go into for the potential, like power clashes, riding dynamics, track meshes, I could go on, and a break from all the Dragon Ball brick fights would be pretty nice as well. Pretty sure Kaneki clears, which is based as I actually like Tokyo Ghoul. Ryu was only good in the latter half though, and only for a few characters. For the first Marvel/DC versus a property exempt from them is Rogue versus Bunny Rabbot, a match I've held near and dear to me for almost a year now. The entire reason I like it is because a while ago, I decided to research Archie Sonic's version of Tails for Franklin Richards, which I'm making a trailer for eventually, by the way, and found myself falling in love with a lot of the characters in it and researching all of them by extension, like Antoine Coulette, Blaze, Mighty the Armadillo, and of course, Bunny Rabbot, aka best girl in both Archie and Can Sonic. Don't even try to argue. Reading her character development and interesting powers was a lot more compelling to me than the other characters in Archie, and after I found out about it, I learned Rogue was easily her best match, and vice versa. Rogue herself as a character, plenty of people, including certain Death Battle researchers, are interested in seeing a run back on, and Bunny is the perfect choice to do so. Not only do their powers mesh really well in a debate and a fight, but so do their personalities and motivations. I'll probably talk about this in some other video eventually, but Bunny hates her powers because she sees herself as a monster, devoid of some humanity, so to speak, since she's basically a furry, with her having to learn how to walk and adjust to her new life again, all with fear that she will lose her body and soul to the Rabbot in her name. Rogue hates her powers because she couldn't touch, love, or know anybody for nearly her entire teenage and adulthood, constantly having to push people away or absorb them into herself and lose more control of her body and soul in the process. Yet despite these problems keeping them from having normal lives, as respectable ladies with caring husbands who would sweep them off their feet, something they always wanted by the way, they can't bear to live without them as they would give them the heroic life with their family and friends they long for. So they are constantly in a cycle of torment yet happiness because they can't live without one or the other. See what I'm getting at? That dynamic by itself sells the whole thing for me, and there is so much more to unpack here. It absolutely deserves an episode. Debate-wise, it's actually really close depending on how far you scale base Archie Sonic forms, but I personally think Bunny should be able to win this. For one of the out-of-the-box matches, we've got Slenderman versus Octodad. For the life of me, I don't know why I want this as much as I do, but I want it. I need it. Seeing two Tuxedo Titans of unexpected, questionable internet search history style fighting is just weirdly enticing to me. That came out wrong. But the match itself seems really interesting. Same with the potential it brings as an episode. From the horror-abundant mishmash of Can that is Slenderman to the comedic-based slice-of-life adventures of Octodad, it's a pretty interesting tonal clash already that would make for interesting analysis, and even better fight given the comedy and horror aspects. Wonder what the track would be like as well. Debate-wise, Octodad dances on his grave and I'm not even joking. He legitimately beats Slenderman. Think on that. Next on the list is Ethan Hunt versus Sam Fisher. This one has been in my top picks for a spy fight for a while now because Ethan Hunt is one of my favorite secret agents and Mission Impossible is one of my favorite secret agents series. For a while now, I've been interested in finding a match for him beyond James Bond or Jason Bourne, and this does that job perfectly. Not only are there really good connections, but this brings an interesting stealth versus up close dynamic, with Ethan being more combat oriented and Sam sneaking around using his tech, which could make for a very interesting sequel to Snake vs. Sam. The music could also be really good as well, and the 3D fights have slowly brought back hype up close combat scenes like Bond vs. Wick and Harley vs. Jinx, so I have no doubt he'll be a nice break from the relatively higher scale fights. Pretty sure stats are somewhat even with Ethan and Sam, with both being pretty dominant in their ways of combat, so it would probably depend on other stuff, but I can't say for certain right now who wins. Back on the Marvel vs. DC train is Black Cat vs. Catwoman. Probably tied with Joker vs. Green Goblin for my favorite Batman vs. Spider-Man idea. It's got legacy, great connections, great potential in saga and animation, great jokes to pull in the analysis and fight, the list goes on. It also just is one of those fights that has to happen and doesn't really have any bad reason or potential as to prevent it from doing so. Really, I just want this one. Black Cat also sweeps it with Based. Best Spider-Man girlfriend, and Mary Jane is toxic as hell's armpit, by the way. For a more comedy-based episode, it's time for Greg Heffley versus Nate Wright. This one has been a pretty big match for years now, and it's pretty easy to see why. Both characters and their series are unbelievably popular as comics, books, movies, shows now, and are a big part of a lot of people's childhoods. I've grown up with both, especially Big Nate in the latter half, and seeing the similarities obviously means I'd be happy to see it, along with the goofy and wacky potential it can bring in all aspects, especially if it was hand-drawn. Do not make the mistake of Danny versus Jake if you do this. The onslaught of humor in both stories and worlds that can be talked about is a treasure trove on the scale of Bill Cipher versus Discord, and could bring a really funny episode no matter who wins it, even though it's Nate and it's not really debatable. Man's got hypnosis on top of several other things. Look it up. Following up that comedy match is another comedy match. That being Kite Man versus Mumen Rider. This one is a heavily thematic match, and its nature as sort of an underspoken characters with cult followings seems weird at first, but after I watched season 1 of One Punch Man, I could see why this is a thing. Mumen Rider is a true hero and a giga chad of one at that, whether it be his fight with Deep Seeking or support of Saitama. He's one of the better characters of One Punch Man, and the same is true for the underspoken hero / villain Kite Man. The idea has a lot of potential in all fields, especially for a dramatic and tragic death like SpongeBob vs. Aquaman or Tanjiro vs. Jonathan. Weirdly enough, I'm pretty sure Mumen Rider actually wins this one via some like city level armor he got in the webcomic or something that the manga will probably include soon. Around this time, we'd be getting a Halloween episode, and my choice for this one is Noob Saibot versus Specter Knight. A bit unknown, but a little more so now, thanks to me, I think. It's a grim battle of Reapers with tons of potential for a dark battle, similar to Saberwolf versus John Talbane. It's got the same kind of potential as well, from talking about all the darkness and death-based powers of both to the potential of the fight itself, which can take itself very gory and brutal due to the healing these two have, and how well Specter Knight fits into a Mortal Kombat scenario. What's more, both franchises are really friggin' popular nowadays, and more Shovel Knight reps are always a win. This one also doesn't really have the toxicity in the debate because no matter what numbers you decide to use, the result is pretty much the same. Unlike Noob's other idea, which is just mid. Speaking of debate, Spectre matches in AP Blizzes and hack stomps. Cope mid to combat stands. Up next, for a fire idea for sure, it's Natsu versus the Human Torch. I haven't seen this one talked about much, which is kind of weird all things considered, because Natsu himself doesn't really have anything beyond Luffy, which I just don't get. Naruto's right there. And Human Torch has nobody really. This one not only gives them a pretty cool opponent to bounce back with, but also a really high stakes fire battle that can do so much with the pair's fire powers, from all of Natsu's techniques and forms to Johnny's clones in supernova mode. You could do basically everything the past pyrokinesis themed episodes failed at on a far higher scale due to Johnny's power and Natsu's boosts since Ace. Johnny wins pretty easily too, so it's extra base. As the next pick for the second cartoon episode and the comedy episode of the year, it's obviously Bugs Bunny versus Mickey Mouse. Even if it wasn't my 6th most wanted, it's the biggest cartoon match in popularity and spectacle in the history of versus debating, let alone death battle, and definitely deserves to go around once that stupid copyright thing with Disney gets resolved. This one has quite literally unmatched potential in every regard that makes every other pick here look pathetic in comparison, and would pull views higher than almost anything this season just by nature of who these ridiculous rodents are. And I mean that in every regard. Music, writing, animation to the highest degree possible, I could go on, but we all know why it's here, so why bother? Pretty sure Bugs wins as well, which is the most base thing in existence. For the final anime pick of the year, it's Gojo versus Makima. One of the biggest death battle requests in years, not just because of Death Battle, but general crossover wishes as well. It's practically the spiritual successor to Madara versus Aizen, a stupidly powerful inverse match of busted beings that are too overpowered for their story to keep up with. And the popularity of Jujutsu Kaisen and Chainsaw Man has served to make this one of the most highly rated and popular matches in recent memory. The pure possibility for the banter, power usages in the more shonen-based Gojo, or eldritch, ethereal, horror-based powers of Makima, and ways those powers can be formatted in an episode will make for a brilliant fight dynamic, as well as the unbridled potential and the realm of animation you could dive into if it's sprite, 3D, or even hand-drawn. The debate is also a big factor, and things I like in matches where I'm not overly familiar with specific parts of it. Except with this one, I do know the characters. Makima because Chainsaw Man is based and I love it, and Gojo because the Bruce's community likes to hype him up like Giorno Giovanna. And I've heard good stuff about Jujutsu Kaisen. As for who wins, I'm not in the mood to explain why and drop a bombshell that'll light up the comments like 4th of July. Just saying I think Makima should win, that's it. Yeah, we all know this was coming. It's my most wanted, Joe Musashi versus Strider Hiryu. It's a super fun video game ninja clash with the same kind of unexpected potential that Saibot versus John or Balrog versus TJ could bring, or other ideas of characters that have fallen off in popularity as of late. The match itself is really solid and saves Ryu Hayabusa from the mid-AF tier idea with Joe, or an even worse rematch with Hiryu, considering that one's wrong, on top of giving Joe, the most based video game ninja ever, a chance to shine in an episode, and Hiryu, a great return that doesn't use another returner like Rabbot. The episode itself can also do a lot with what it's given as a sprite or even 3D file if they're feeling ambitious, especially with the retro rock style the song could take with anime and ninja style influences like flutes or drums, but also the great way their powers can clash just like Hiryu versus Ryu did, and the magic element based Joe Musashi and the more tech and future based Strider Hiryu. There's also potential for a really hype and gory kill and respectful death right after if they pay attention to the characters. Joe should also win, and that's based beyond belief. For the season finale, instead of doing something predictable like Galactus vs. Unicron, which Death Battle will have to do eventually, even if they still haven't freaking done it, I'm picking a different idea that is also a Transformers vs. Kite matchup. Optimus Prime versus Superman. This one has become pretty popular very quickly thanks to the effort put into doing so after a member of the community sadly passed away, and as a tribute, this idea, a favorite of his, was commissioned to Theirwolf Media as a track. Really, the idea not only manages to connect some of my favorite and most loved characters from my childhood, but also make a match for Superman that doesn't require you to limit him or ignore parts of him, because Optimus is legitimately on the same level as Goku for a Superman battle, but it's had better in areas all the same. The personalities are a lot more similar and can make for plenty of high personality banter moments. Their powers and abilities can bounce off each other in better ways as well as in greater scale without being annoying and tiring, and the analysis segments can be structured and morphed into a really wholesome episode on the scale of All Might vs. Might Guy. Same with the fight, which can't be done in anything other than 3D. Maybe hand-drawn if it's good enough. These two larger-than-life heroes meeting and fighting sounds like a dream come true for the child in me, and really, it's one of the best options to close out the season with a bang, no matter how it ends or who dies. Though it better be a sad ending with the loser resurrecting and hanging out with the winner. For who does win? I've heard Optimus actually has surprisingly good arguments and hacks that could seriously have over Clark, because honestly, if anybody can beat Superman, it's Optimus Prime. So, that's the video. Hope you enjoyed and happy 1-year anniversary to my channel. Please go watch all my other content and videos so it'll keep on going until it's as big can be. See you next time!